Hello, friends. Welcome back to Heartscapes, where we're learning the system of Reiki to be rooted, to be spacious, to be connected, and to remember ourselves. My name is Michaela. Welcome back to the studio. I'm sitting down today to just have a heart-to-heart with you about some things that have been really heavy on my heart and mind lately, and that I just want to bring into this space where we've been able to have such generative conversations about things that matter. Over the last year, there's been a wave of legislation here in my country, the United States, that have targeted LGBTQII siblings all across our nation. Laws that make it difficult, painful, dangerous for people to simply be who they are, to express who they are in their daily life, despite the fact that nationwide statistics show that nearly 71% of us really favor leaving people the fuck alone to just live their lives, to be their best self, to be their truest self in their day-to-day life without bothering anybody else. And this trend, it pains me and it worries me on a lot of levels. Certainly as a person with friends and family that these really vicious forms of legislation are targeting. It pains me as a citizen of a country who has long identified ourselves as the land of the free. And it pains me as a Reiki practitioner, the teacher and purveyor of a system of practice that centers remembering the wholeness of our true self and living that truth in our daily life. I founded Heartscapes at the intersection of self-reflection, spiritual practice, and social action. It grew out of my dozen years working in social justice leadership development in universities and nonprofits, and a lifetime before that of being intimately connected in social change and activist communities. I found in that time that my true way of being is not to be out on the front lines and organizing for active change. It's to be in the wings, supporting those who are doing that work, creating spaces of wholeness and respite and refuge, places of healing and transformation, fortification and resilience, spaces where people can come to refresh, to renew, to remember themselves so that they can step into their true purpose. And there are times when I feel called to be more explicit, to be more overt about the true mission of Heartscapes, which is truly to be a place of support, refuge, and a place to uplift that kind of work in the world. And this is one of those times. And so I wanted to do a couple of things in this video. I wanted firstly to offer a specific form of support that is mine to give. It's an action that I can take that's available to me while I work through other actions that I might take. And I wanted to do what we always do on this channel, to explore our daily life, the things that matter to us through the lens of the system of Reiki from its Japanese origins. Specifically, I wanted to share the ways in which that I have learned and been deeply inspired by the transgender, queer, gender-neutral siblings in my life, the way in which they have shown me a form of embodied spirituality that really perfectly reflects some of the core values and concepts and teachings of the system of Reiki. So first, the offer. For the months of May and June, I am extending an open invitation for people who are self-identified members of the LGBTQII community who feel personally impacted by the tensions that are going on in the country, whether or not you live in a state that is directly impacted by this legislation. There's a vicarious trauma that happens when we see these sorts of things happening, even if it's not where we live. The open invitation to come and have a Reiki session with me, a space where we can lean into rest, refuge, resilience, and whatever else it is that you need for that time. These sessions can be done in person in my studio in Davis, California, if you are in the area, or over the phone as a distance session. I'll put information on how to schedule your session down below. Please feel free to share this offer with folks in your community that you think would benefit. And if you're watching this video after the month of June in 2023, and you feel compelled by this offer, please reach out anyway, and we'll see what we can do. I might go ahead and extend it. We'll see what happens. We'll see what kind of response there is. Secondly, again, I wanted to just share some of the ways in which I have seen core teachings of the system of Reiki embodied and reflected very beautifully in the lives of particularly transgender, gender neutral, and queer folks in my life. There's a couple of very specific examples that stand out to me. Firstly, if you've been around this channel for a while, you've probably heard me say many times that the system of Reiki, the purpose of practicing this system, and one of the promised outcomes of practicing this system is to remember the wholeness of our true self, to clear away all of the detritus and distraction and pain and limitations and limiting beliefs that have come into our life, come into our nervous system, into our thought process, into our heart, into our bodies even, that get in the way of us truly knowing and expressing who we truly are. The system of Reiki has a lot to say about who we truly are, specifically our identity as an interconnected being, connected with each other, with the web of life, with the whole universe, even if you're willing to take your imagination out that far. But also in the day-to-day lived reality of our lives. What does that mean? We often talk in our classes and different spaces about living the system of Reiki both in the relative reality of our daily life and in the ultimate reality of our spiritual selves. So in the ultimate reality of our spiritual selves, we are an interconnected being. We're one with all of life. We are a great, shiny, bright light, luminous, clear, or a deep well of fertile, velvety darkness, however we experience the totality of ourselves, connected with everything else. That's the ultimate reality of our experience of our being as a spiritual being. And the relative reality of our daily life, the sovereign and discrete, time-bound experience that we have in this body, in this time, in this lifetime, that means some specific and varied things about how we approach our life. The idea of who we truly are, what our true purpose is, and what is it that is in the way of us truly feeling, embodying, and experiencing that, knowing it deep in our gut, being in a place of grounded, calm stability in the truth of who we are. This is what the system of Reiki promises us. It is what the practices and elements of the system guide us towards, help to train our body, mind, our voice, and our breath to align ourselves with. And if we look at the experience of somebody who is stepping into the truth of their gender identity in the face of something as incredibly daunting and tangibly challenging as living in a body that does not feel true to who we are, then we can really see a powerful embodied example of these principles. Now, there are many ways in which we might not feel at home in our body, and we might make changes to our body to better reflect who we know ourselves to be on the inside. Now, what motivates to make those changes can come from a place of trueness and wholeness, or it might come from a place of hurt, of trauma, of woundedness. That's a path that many of us walk. Are we making choices from one place or from the other? For example, there's times when I have, really disliked the way that my body looked and, engaged in behavior that was not particularly healthy or good for my heart, good for my self-esteem in order to try to look better, right? Those were actions that I took from the perspective of woundedness. On the other hand, I have a lifelong, well, at least from my teenage years, long practice of collecting elaborate tattoo work on my body. I've been slowly changing the surface landscape of my body to better reflect my story, my journey, my relative reality of my life, aspects of who I am that feel very, very true and alive on the inside, and that I want to express on the outside in some way. For me, that is absolutely changes to my body taken in service of stepping more fully into my wholeness. At this point in my journey, 10 years into working with the system of Reiki and 6 or 7 years into working with it from the perspective of its Japanese origins that really center this concept of living our wholeness, I can easily say that my practice of tattooing my body is intimately connected with my practice of the system of Reiki and my process of coming into my wholeness, my purpose, and expression of who I am. There are many ways in which people can take on shifting the temple of our body to better reflect who we truly are on the inside. And I see this with my transgender siblings in such incredible, powerful, just in so many ways, awe-inspiring ways. To take on a journey that is not only challenging physically, emotionally, mentally, but that is also so often indirectly or very directly opposed by the people around us, whether that's the people in our immediate family, our communities, the state, or the nation that we live in. And one way or the other, folks who are stepping into that form of trueness to their own self inevitably face opposition, inevitably face somebody in their life, probably many somebodies in their life or in the world around them, telling them that this is a wrong expression, that this is not what is right for them. But really, what is meant by that is this is something that's not right for the person who is doing the opposing. It's something that gets inside of their own sense of opposition, their own sense of dis-ease, their lack of wholeness, there's a constriction that I see in people who oppose the authentic, true, and healthy expression of other people. Now, I know that's a potentially controversial thing to say, and perhaps there are those watching this video that disagree with me on that. I'm very open to a conversation about it. But back to the topic at hand. What I've seen from the people in my life and people just out in the world that I pay attention to who are, despite all of the opposition, choosing to make changes to their body, to their self-expression, to their names, to the ways in which they refer to themselves in order to better reflect who they know themselves to be on the inside, to better step into their wholeness, to remember the wholeness of their true self in their daily life, to express that and walk that in their daily life, to me, are embodying a fundamental principle of the system of Reiki. They're giving us a tangible and very clear example of what that can look like in our lives. And whether or not that particular form of change, form of stepping into wholeness is right for somebody else who is observing this, for the cisgender folks among us who, like myself, don't feel compelled to make changes to the appearance of my body to better conform with my gender, I think that there's a really powerful learning that we can receive, and inspiration and humility, quite honestly, in watching somebody and supporting, preferably supporting people in walking through such a journey of wholeness and remembering themselves. It's powerfully inspiring to me. And it's something that it breaks my heart that so many people can look at that and see something bad or wrong or something dangerous, something to be afraid of, something to hate, something to move away from, when instead we could be seeing this as incredible inspiration and permission giving for us to be our full and true self as well. So that's the first example. Another core principle, the second example I want to give that is central to the system of Reiki when practiced from its Japanese origins, is a rather esoteric concept, one that can be very challenging to understand and to figure out kind of how does this show up in my actual life. And that is the concept of non-duality. The idea that our human brain very naturally divides things into categories that are in opposition to each other. Good, bad, right, wrong, safe, dangerous, black, white, up, down, hot, cold, right? There's great utility in this, right? Being able to quickly identify and categorize something as either safe or not safe, edible, not edible, it has been incredibly important to our existence, right? To our survivability in the world. And yet, when we get to a point where our fundamental survival is not in question, where our needs are met, where we are safe, we're stable, we're secure, taken care of, then it becomes something that can get in the way of our relationships with ourselves and with others, to see things in such dualistic categories, to have a difficulty or an inability to make enough room inside of ourselves to hold things that seem to be completely in opposition to each other. I had a friend today talking about a kind of a heartbreaking experience that he was having. And he said, I'm holding gratitude and pain in the same hand. I'm holding gratitude and pain in the same hand. It was such a powerful, beautiful, just heart-wrenching expression of non-duality, of being able to pull together things that we might see as being impossible to hold in the same space. Gratitude and pain, love and pain. To be able to make room for those in the same space, to allow them to coexist. This is a form of non-duality, and it's an experience that greatly enriches our life. Because he was able to hold those two seemingly conflicting emotions, he was able to really be in an experience that was really important and not, push away from it, not stay in the painful parts, but really step into the beautiful parts as well. There are many, many, many examples of places where duality gets in the way of our happiness, of our joy, our contentment, our compassion for ourselves or for other people. It's certainly something that gets in the way of being in good, right relationship with people who we feel in opposition to, people whose lifestyle perhaps feels very different from our own. And we feel like, well, I believe myself to be a good person. So if you're living your life very differently from me, you must be a bad person, even if the way that you're living your life isn't hurting anybody. That's not to say that there aren't harmful things in this world that we, should oppose or we should take action to change. It's not saying that at all, but it's saying that if we automatically judge something as bad or wrong because it's different than us and we must be good and so they must be bad, well, we're stepping into a world of discontent, a world of disharmony, of dis-ease, an inability to live in a state of compassion for ourselves or for other people. And that, my friends, is a very unhappy place to live our lives. I could go on and on about non-duality. It's something we spend quite a bit of time in our classes looking at, both conceptually, spiritually, from the perspective of the Buddhist origins of this practice, but also in practical terms. What does this look like in our life? Why it doesn't matter that we take on a non-dualistic stance and mindset and perspective and actions in our life? Well, because it makes our lives easier, happier, more content, more whole, more healthy. And so when I look at people in my life who, in the area of gender, are able to hold what traditionally are seen as completely opposite things, male and female, and are able to identify inside of themselves through an embodied feeling, deep within, that these two things don't actually live in opposition inside of me. Inside of me, they actually come together. Perhaps they blend, or perhaps they stand side by side. Perhaps they dissolve away altogether and don't actually mean anything at all inside of a person's lived experience. A person who lives into a neutral gender identity is, in a very real, very embodied, very true way, living a non-dualistic experience, at least in that one realm of their life. And we can learn from that. We can be inspired by that. We can say, if this person is able to hold things that are so quintessentially oppositional as male and female in the same body in a way that feels harmonious and balanced and blended and just not in opposition, then what might I be able to hold in my life? What are the things in my life that I'm seeing as inextricably opposite of each other that I'm not making room for in my mind, in my heart, in my body, in my actions, in my relationships? Where am I suffering because of that? Where am I causing suffering to others because I'm unwilling or unable to make enough room for two things or more than two things that seem to be in opposition to each other but are not inherently bad, right? Gratitude and pain together in the same hand. Male and female together in the same body. Compassion and disagreement in the same relationship, in the same conversation. That's one that's come up for me recently in a really important relationship. Right? Tensions around, can we disagree with each other, right? And still love each other, have compassion for each other, have respect for each other, listen to each other. Can we hold disagreement and respect and compassion in the same body, in the same mind, the same heart, the same conversation? The answer is yes, we absolutely can. The system of Reiki gives us practices that help us to literally feel like there's more room inside of ourselves so that we can make room for all of it. We can process all of it. We can be with all of it. And I derive great inspiration from people who are demonstrating the holding of opposites inside of their one self. And gender is one area that I see that happening. And it makes me even more sorrowful to see that form of beauty, that form of teaching, that form of living into the wholeness of oneself opposed and criticized, legislated against. To see people harmed for it. We can do something about that. I don't know what that something is for you, right? There's a long list of things that we can do. Get active politically. We can create safe spaces for people. We can talk to our friends and our family who might be struggling with these topics, that might, feel that sense of duality of like, but this lifestyle goes against my values. Perhaps goes against my religion, perhaps goes against everything that I know to be true. I'm struggling with that. That's okay. It's hard to run up against something that seems in opposition to our values and our beliefs. But can we pause for a second and ask, is this really harming anybody? Is this something I could make room for? Just make room for other people to be their whole and true self. Is that something I could do? And I'm here to tell you that it is. And you don't have to compromise who you are to do that. You just need to make yourself bigger, more spacious. So I want to reiterate this offer and add another one to it. The initial offer is for any of you who self-identify as a member of the LGBTQII community who feels impacted by the legislation and just cultural grime that's present right now around these topics, that I want to offer you a space of rest to come and have a session either over the phone or in person as my investment in our collective liberation, our collective future. And if you are a person who is not a member of this community, if you're struggling with this issue from the other side, if you're feeling like, wow, I'm having a hard time accepting this lifestyle or this expression of self, these identities, and I wish there was more room inside of me, right? But I feel affronted by it. I feel my values attacked by it. I feel something I can't name. There's something crunchy about it. And I feel like I have to say no to it and oppose it. And I'm just not sure how to go about that. But I want to be kind. I want to be good to the other humans in this world. And I'm struggling. If that's you, then I want to invite you into a session. It's a Reiki-based coaching session where we dig into these things and we use embodiment practices to find the places where these conflicts seem to live and to help soften them, put more space around them. This service does come with a fee, and that fee directly supports the free sessions that I am offering to anybody who self-identifies with the LGBTQII community. So you can help support wellness and goodness for other people by supporting wellness and goodness inside of yourself. I'll put information about both of those offerings down below. I'll put a link to some data analysis around the statistic that I mentioned earlier, that about 71% of Americans actually are in favor of letting people be themselves and oppose these kinds of legislation. This is actually a level of support that is uncommon around a divisive issue. And somehow that's not being reflected well in the laws that are being passed. There's a disconnection between we the people and our representatives in Congress at this time. That's also something that we can do about if you're inclined to take action in that way. Okay, friends, that's what I wanted to share. That's what's on my heart today. Thank you so much for listening, especially if this is a challenging issue for you in any way. I appreciate you getting to the very end. If you stuck it out to the end of this video, I invite you to share your thoughts, your reflections, your feelings, your experiences around any of these things down below. Even if you disagree with me, I welcome disagreement. There's enough room for it. We can hold that with respect, with compassion, with goodness for each other. And friends, as you walk your journey around these issues from whatever point on the map you occupy, may you be deeply, powerfully, sweetly provisioned for your part of this journey. Thank you for listening. Until next time, I love you. Goodbye.